No one noticed when my hands began to tremble under the white linen tablecloth. Glasses clinked in toasts, flashes captured flawless smiles, and there I was, smiling too, but inside, exploding. Every laugh around me was a stab in the heart. Every sidelong glance a cruel reminder of the place I had been relegated to. The entire hall seemed like something out of a dream that was never mine. Cascading crystal chandeliers, classical music in the background, white flowers everywhere. Everything was impeccable, orchestrated with almost cruel precision. I was there as part of the scenery, and yet it was as if I shouldn't be there, as if every detail silently screamed that I was a mistake. My name is Elisa. I am 33 years old, and, until that night, I thought I knew where I stood. I thought I had learned to endure certain pains in silence. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I experienced at that wedding, much less for what I was about to reveal. The bride was Bianca. Yes, Bianca. The woman who, for years, had been my best friend, my soul sister, my mirror, my confidant. We had been thick as thieves since adolescence, stuck together in a way that others couldn't understand. I knew every fake laugh she made, every sincere tear she shed. I could tell when she was lying, even to herself. And yet, even so, I didn't see what she was willing to do to me. The fiancé, of course, was Henrique, and that name should say it all. Because Henrique wasn't just her fiancé, he was the most painful question mark in my history, a figure who infiltrated our lives as if he wanted nothing, and gradually became the center of everything, including my pain. But that night, no one knew the real story. No one there knew that I had once loved Henrique, that there was a past between us that had never been buried, only suffocated by conventions, appearances, and convenient silences. No one knew that I had been the first, the disposable one, the shadow behind the magazine cover romance. I sat at table 12, far from the dance floor, far from the flower-covered altar, far from the bride's gaze, a position that said everything without saying anything, a choice that was made by someone, perhaps by her, perhaps by him, with the clear intention of reminding me of my place, or of his absence. I was served white wine. I don't drink white wine. Around me were people I barely knew or had fragile relationships with. Not a single face of a true friend, no emotional anchor. I smiled reflexively so as not to appear bitter. But inside me, something was boiling, something that came from long before that day, something I myself had spent years trying to bury. The moment for the toast arrived. The bride's mother gave a moving speech. The father spoke of his son-in-law's virtues. Then came the friends, with inside jokes and stories that everyone was supposed to find funny. And then Bianca took the microphone. She was beautiful, radiant, the perfect bride. And for a second, I almost forgot to breathe. I wanted to thank everyone here, but especially a few people who are part of my history, those who were with me in the worst moments, and also in my greatest joys. She looked at the table where her parents were sitting, then at the table with her college friends, and finally she scanned the room with her eyes until she stopped, in the opposite direction from me. You know who you are. Some of you, more than others, have made sacrifices. You gave things up. For me. Laughter. More glances. More silence. But I understood. That was for me. That sentence, loaded with poison wrapped in sugar, was her way of saying, I know what you did, and I won. My blood ran cold. And it was at that moment, in the middle of that carefully staged spectacle, that something inside me broke. I had a secret, one that could shatter that golden facade in seconds. And for the first time in years, I considered using it. I often think that if that particular day had not happened, maybe everything would have been different. But the truth is that stories like mine don't start with a big event. They creep in slowly, through small cracks, disguised as coincidence. Bianca and I met in the second year of high school. She arrived at school with that outgoing, confident manner, as if the world already knew who she was. I, on the other hand, was the type who took up little space. I've always been more observant, more introspective. Maybe that's why she approached me so quickly. Bianca liked to be seen, and I saw her, really saw her. Our friendship grew quickly and intensely. We became inseparable. We slept at each other's houses, shared clothes, dreams, insecurities. I admired her beauty, her courage, her ability to turn any room into a stage. And she protected me. She made me feel visible. It was such a strong bond that for a long time, I didn't realize that the space between us was also a mirror, and that sometimes that mirror erased me. Time passed. We started college together, in the same communication program. She wanted to be a TV presenter. I wanted to write, to tell stories. And it was there, in those stuffy classrooms and crowded hallways, that we met Henrique. Henrique was the kind of guy who walked into a room and seemed to change the air. Not because he was handsome, although he was, but because of his calm, confident, almost enigmatic manner. He was studying advertising and had a smile that broke down any resistance. And, of course, it was Bianca who noticed him first. He has a strange energy, doesn't he? The kind that disappears for days and then comes back acting like he never left, she commented once, watching him from afar in the college cafeteria. I laughed, agreeing, but what I didn't tell her, or anyone else, was that he had already spoken to me. We had done some work together, a campaign project, and we got closer. Long conversations, looks that lingered longer than necessary, messages exchanged in the middle of the night. He told me he liked my calm manner, that he felt at peace with me. I believed him. I fell in love. But I never told Bianca. Maybe because I already knew, deep down, that it wouldn't last. Maybe because I knew my friend well enough to know that once she decided to look at Henrique, there would be no more room for me. And that's exactly what happened. He started to pull away. The messages became fewer and fewer. And suddenly, he was in her group chat, at her friends' get-togethers, spending her weekends with her. I remember the night she told me excitedly that he had asked for her number, as if it were news, as if he had never been by my side. He said he always thought you were too quiet, you know, but that I have an energy that attracts him. Funny, right? It wasn't funny, but I smiled. I smiled out of loyalty, out of fear, out of love. They started dating, first as friends, then as something more. I watched everything from the sidelines, swallowing the bitter taste of invisibility. They never knew what happened between us. I made sure of that. I preferred to believe that I was being mature, generous, that if I really loved them both, I would let them be happy. But what came next wasn't happiness. It was subtle exclusion, veiled ostracism. Little by little, I was left out. The invitations stopped coming. Conversations became filtered. Bianca changed the subject whenever Henrique came up. And he barely looked at me. Even so, I stayed there. Because I still believed that friendship was worth more. That she would choose me in the end. That time, somehow, would put everything in its place. But time, sometimes, is just the backdrop for forgetting. Years passed. They solidified their relationship, broke up, got back together, and I remained orbiting around them. When I moved to a new city for a new job, she cried. She said she missed me. But soon after, she went silent. She responded less. She grew cold. And then, one day, I received the message that would change everything. He asked me to marry him, and I want you to be my maid of honor. I read that sentence about 10 times. Not because I was surprised by the request, but because of its irony. Maid of honor. Me, the shadow, the faded figure, the silent witness, the accomplice to my own invisibility. At that moment, something inside me shifted, and even without knowing what it was, I accepted. I accepted because I needed to understand, because something still hurt, because deep down, I knew that story wasn't over, and that there was still a truth to be told, even if no one was ready to hear it. I accepted being a godmother with a lump in my throat. It wasn't out of friendship, which no longer existed as it once had, nor out of politeness. I accepted on impulse because a part of me was still searching for an explanation, or perhaps justice. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see with my own eyes what was left of that story. I wanted in some way to put myself back where they had taken me, even if only as a spectator. The bridesmaids' WhatsApp group was created 2 days later. Bianca was excited as always. She sent long audio messages, GIFs, inspirational videos. She planned every detail with an excitement that bordered on frenzy. And me, well, I responded. I tried to seem present, interested, but from the beginning, something was wrong. The conversations flowed quickly, and suddenly everyone knew the color of the dresses, the destination of the bachelorette party, the groomsmen's dates. I hadn't been consulted. I was just informed. Like someone who receives the schedule for an event they're attending but has no say in it. Friend, I thought of you in a burgundy dress, okay? I think it suits your skin tone, Bianca wrote in a private message. At first, I thought it was nice, but I soon understood. I was the only one who hadn't chosen her own color. All the other bridesmaids had given their opinions, sent photos, debated. With me, it was different. I was delegated. At the bachelorette party, I felt the real weight of exclusion. They chose a beach house in Arrayal, full of activities that clearly did not include me. Boat trips, open bar parties, invasive games. I felt out of place, like a piece off the board. On the first night, while everyone danced around the pool, I drank a soda alone, sitting on a lounge chair. Bianca walked by me, laughing loudly, hugging a new friend from work. When she saw me, she said, "Are you okay there? I thought you might want some quiet." That was it. I was the one who needed silence, the quiet one, the one who didn't fit in. I tried to laugh to hide it, but something hurt deep down. It wasn't just the distance, it was the condescending tone, as if my presence was a polite inconvenience, as if it would be better if I just disappeared. Behind the scenes of the wedding, details flowed in groups I wasn't part of. I found out there were rehearsals for the bridesmaids' entrance, shared playlists, inside jokes. When I asked questions, I always got hurried, distracted answers. "You're being too sensitive," Bianca said in a voice message when I mentioned that I had been left out of choosing the entrance song. "It's nothing personal, just a rush." But it was personal. It was always me. It was always forgetfulness, carelessness, rushing, but only directed at me. The last straw came 2 weeks before the wedding, when I went to pick up the dress. I arrived at the store excited, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that everything would work out. But when I tried on the dress, I understood once and for all, it didn't have the same fit, the same cut, or the same care as the others. It was a generic piece, hastily adapted. While everyone else would be wearing dresses with delicate adjustments and thoughtful cutouts, mine was ordinary, invisible. I left the fitting room and looked at the saleswoman. She smiled awkwardly. "This is the model they sent you." I felt a twinge in my stomach. At that moment, everything made sense. I wasn't part of that moment. I was a formality, an uncomfortable reminder of what had been, that Bianca needed to keep out of politeness or guilt. And Henrique? During all that time, he kept his distance. Formal, polite, he rarely spoke to me, and when he did, it was with rehearsed caution, as if each sentence had been reviewed. A man walking on broken glass. We never talked about the past. We never touched on what had happened. It was as if our brief but intense involvement had never existed. But sometimes, in the quick glances we exchanged, something slipped out. A hesitation, a thick silence, an untold story. I returned home with the dress in the trunk, and an anguish that no longer fit inside me. That night, I sat on the couch, opened a bottle of red wine, and reread all the messages from the beginning. I saw there the complete picture of exclusion, the generic invitations, the late replies, the calculated silences. And then I went to the box of memories I keep at the back of the closet. Inside, a single photo. Enrique and me, lying on the grass in a park, laughing as if time had stopped. His hand holding mine, his eyes in mine. Behind the photo, a letter. The only one he ever wrote me. The one I never had the courage to destroy. That night, for the first time, I considered taking it with me to the wedding. In the last week before the wedding, I realized that my presence was tolerated, but not desired. There was no longer any room for doubt, and as much as I tried to maintain my dignity, something inside me was silently breaking. The ceremony approached with the weight of a clock that keeps ticking, even when you want it to stop. Bianca sent me sporadic messages, almost automatic, as if she were checking my name off a checklist. Nothing was asked. Everything was imposed. The godparents will enter in pairs in a set order. You'll go in with Enrique's cousin, okay? He's taller than you, so it'll look nice. There was no, "Is that okay with you?" There was no room for negotiation. I even wrote and deleted messages, trying to express my discomfort. But every time I started typing, the old voice came back. "Don't cause trouble. Don't be a problem. Just go." And I went, as so many times before, silencing myself for the sake of others' convenience. The wedding rehearsals were a spectacle in themselves. Everyone was smiling, relaxed, hugging, joking, and laughing softly. Bianca moved like a star in constant orbit, surrounded by adoration. When she saw me, she gave me a superficial, distant smile. A kindness that, coming from someone else, would have seemed polite. From her, it sounded like an obligation. At the second rehearsal, she asked me to adjust my position at the entrance. "You go last, okay? Because, well, you have a calmer gait, and I think it closes the line better." It was a lie. What she wanted was to put me away from the photos, away from the stairs, away from the spotlight. And me? I accepted. Part of me still thought silence was safer than confrontation. Henrique showed up only on the last day. He was elegant, restrained. Our eyes met for a few seconds, and he looked away. Then he came up to me with a half-smile that seemed more guilty than happy. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. He hesitated. He wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe salvage what we had. But in the end, he just muttered, "Thanks for being here. It means a lot. To her." To her. It echoed inside me like a sentence. My presence wasn't for me, not even for us. It was for her, and only for her. The night before the wedding, all the bridesmaids were going to sleep together in a hotel booked by Bianca. It was a tradition, she said, a moment just for us, to celebrate our friendship before the big day. But of course, my name wasn't on the reservation. I received a message at 10 p.m. Elisa. It was a mistake at the front desk. But everything is sorted out now, okay? Unfortunately, you'll have to share a room with Henrique's sister. She snores a little, Lowell, but she's a sweetheart. I didn't even reply. I settled into the makeshift room, listening to the laughter coming from the master suite in the distance. The other bridesmaids were there, drinking sparkling wine, posting stories, tagging each other. And my name? My face? Nothing. I was the absent presence, the discreet shadow, the piece that is tolerated out of habit, not affection. I looked in the bedroom mirror and barely recognized who I saw. My face looked tired, dull. I, who had always been strong, who had always been there for others, was now lying there, faded, disfigured inside. It was there, on that hotel bed where no one wanted me, that the idea matured. I had the letter. I had the photo. I had the truth. And perhaps for the first time, I also had the right to use them, not as revenge, but as liberation. I woke up on the day of the wedding before sunrise. The room was dark, stuffy, and Henrique's sister's breathing was irregular, heavy. I didn't sleep. I spent the whole night lying awake, listening to the soft noises of the world around me and the deafening screams in my mind. The letter was in my bag, folded between 2 pages of an old book. The photo was tucked inside my cell phone case, protected like a living secret. I had brought them with me without knowing exactly why. But now, seeing the dress hanging on the door, the plain fabric, the dull color, I felt that they were no longer memories. They were weapons. Still, I hesitated. In the room where all the bridesmaids were getting ready, the atmosphere was like another world. Champagne at 8 a.m., professional makeup artists, a soundtrack carefully chosen by Bianca. Every detail was carefully crafted to create an image. Every gesture was staged. And there I was, in the corner, with red eyes and a face still swollen from a sleepless night. When I walked in, Bianca smiled. A short, controlled smile, the kind of smile someone gives when they realize that someone's presence there isn't adding anything, but rather serving to soften their appearance. You're here. That's great. We were waiting to start the photos. The photos, of course. Someone handed me a robe. Mine was different. While all the others had their names embroidered in gold, mine simply said, Godmother, in plain dull letters. I noticed. They noticed too. But no one said anything. Because in this type of ceremony, silence is more polite than the truth. During the photo shoot, I was placed in the corners, never in the center, never next to the bride. And with each click, I felt something inside me retreating, shrinking. It wasn't just pain, it was a kind of disappearance. As if, slowly, I was becoming a disposable memory. Henrique arrived shortly before the ceremony. I saw him as he walked down the aisle in his tailored suit, his hair perfectly combed, his expression focused. Our eyes didn't meet, but I felt him pass by. I felt as if a cold wind had blown through my chest. In the mirror, I tried to look at myself again. My makeup was perfect. My dress was straight. On the outside, I was just another piece of the scenery. But on the inside, a crack was opening, and everything I had swallowed for years was pouring out. No one knew that Henrique had cried on my lap. No one knew that I knew his doubts, his fears, his secrets. That he kissed me for the first time on a rainy morning, saying he had never felt so comfortable with anyone. No one knew, because I never told anyone. Until that moment. The ceremony music began. The guests were seated, the godparents lined up. Someone handed me the bouquet, pointed to my partner and whispered, "You go in after Renata, wait for the signal." I waited, but what I felt at that moment was not anxiety. It was an unsettling clarity. The world was spinning, the lights were twinkling, and everything inside me said, "You don't belong here." I walked in, one step after another, eyes forward, neutral smile. The entire church watched me for seconds, seconds that felt like an eternity. And then I saw her, Bianca, in the back, about to enter. Beautiful, flawless. The woman I had called my friend for years, who held my hand at funerals, laughed with me on trips, slept in my room countless times. The same woman who now treated me like a mistake she couldn't admit. She saw me. She smiled. A smile that was half memory, half triumph. I sat down in the reserved pew, placed the bouquet on my lap, and closed my eyes for a moment. The letter weighed heavily in my bag as if it were alive. The photo burned against my leg, and deep down, a question began to grow. Why do you still protect what destroys you? The ceremony continued. Beautiful words, Rehearsed vows, choreographed promises. Everyone was enchanted. Everyone was immersed in that illusion of perfection, except me. The rings were exchanged, the kiss was given, the applause echoed, and amid the applause and tears of others, I felt my throat close up. At the reception, the mood was euphoric. Luxurious decorations, lavish tables, background music, waiters trained not to leave any glasses empty. I circulated like a foreign body. I greeted people who barely recognized me. I sat at the assigned table in the corner, with guests who didn't know my name. It was there, in that isolation disguised as etiquette, that reality hit me hard. No one there knew who I was, and those who did knew had chosen to forget. On the dance floor, Bianca spun like a sun. Henrique smiled beside her. And I, in the darkness of my table, opened my bag. I took out the letter. I carefully smoothed out the folded paper. My heart was beating fast, very fast, because at that moment, I no longer wanted to hide. The letter trembled in my hands. It wasn't just because of the thin paper, yellowed by time. It was because of the memory of how I felt when I received it, years ago, in the early hours of the morning when everything seemed possible. Henrique had written it in a hurry, in crooked, hasty letters, as if each line were a secret that had to come out before he lost his courage. "I can't pretend anymore that what we have is casual," he said. "With you, everything seems clearer, and I hate myself for thinking about her when I'm with you, but I do." I remember how I cried that night. I remember how I reread each sentence, trying to find some way to justify what he felt for me, and for Bianca at the same time. I remember, above all, how I kept that letter, not out of attachment, but because part of me knew that one day it would be important, not to him, not to her, but to me. In that luxurious hall, surrounded by people applauding a staged love, something finally broke inside me. It wasn't anger. It was something more primitive, more painful. The realization that, for years, I had nullified myself for people who never hesitated to erase me, who used me as a crutch, as a shadow, as a shield. I got up from the table without thinking, the letter in my hand, the photo folded in my pocket. The hall was full, but the path to the stage seemed unobstructed, or maybe it was my certainty that cleared the way. One of the godparents was speaking into the microphone, excited, telling some inside joke about college days. People laughed. The light was warm, golden, the kind of setting where no one expects the truth. I climbed the steps to the stage. The microphone was within reach. No one stopped me. They didn't even notice. Until I spoke. "Excuse me. I promise I won't take long." Silence fell quickly. A heavy, uncomfortable silence, as if the entire room had held its breath. Bianca looked at me from the center of the dance floor, the glass still in her hand, her eyes wide. Henrique slowly turned his face away, as if afraid to acknowledge what he already knew. "You don't know me," I continued, my voice trembling but firm. "Or at least, you don't know me as you should." I saw the glances exchanged, the whispers begin, but I continued. "My name is Elisa, and for a long time, I believed that silence was the noblest form of love, that protecting others, even when they hurt us, was a sign of character. Today, I see that silence can also be a prison." I took a deep breath. The letter was still in my hand. The paper was sweaty. The edge was torn. "Henrique, I loved you. You know that. And you loved me too, even if you never had the courage to admit it. We both know that." A murmur ran through the hall like lightning. Henrique turned pale. Bianca stood motionless. "I didn't come here to expose anyone," I lied. "But I had to come up here because if I left today without saying anything, I would take with me a piece of me that no longer belongs to me, and I'm tired of carrying what you left in me." I opened my hand. The letter fell to the stage floor like a sentence. "Bianca, you were my best friend, and you knew it. Maybe not everything, but you felt it, and yet you chose to silence me. You chose to reduce me." She started to stammer something but stopped. Tears were already streaming down her face. I don't know if it was guilt, anger, or simply fear that the perfect world she had built would crumble before everyone. "I don't want anyone's place. I just want my name back, my voice." I returned the microphone to its stand. The hall was in shock. No one applauded. No one moved. It was as if time had frozen in that moment. I stepped off the stage and crossed the hall under hundreds of stares. But I no longer felt ashamed. I no longer felt afraid. I felt relief. I had nothing left to lose. When I reached the exit, one of the bridesmaids ran up to me. She touched my arm. "Elisa, I didn't know. I'm sorry." I nodded. No words. No need for anything else. On the sidewalk, the night air was cold and clean. The sky was silent. I took out my phone and for the first time in years, deleted the photo. Then I called a car, and I left. The car arrived quickly, but my head was still at the hall. As I drove away from the party, I couldn't stop thinking about the silence that followed after I stepped off the stage. It was a full silence, full of things that no one else could pretend they didn't hear, and that gave me a strange peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. On the way home, I leaned my forehead against the window and let the city run by like a silent movie. The empty streets, the flickering streetlights, the ghosts of everything I had left behind. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just breathed, deeply, for the first time. I arrived home with sore feet and an exhausted soul, but strangely whole. I left the dress on the living room floor. I took off my earrings and my makeup. I took a hot shower that felt like a baptism. And when I looked in the mirror, I noticed something different. There was a steadiness in my gaze, a kind of raw strength, still newborn, but real. The next day, the messages started coming in. First, it was the bridesmaids, in various tones, some shocked, others confused, a few sympathetic. Then a long message from Bianca, which I read and didn't reply to. She didn't apologize. She just said she was very shaken, that she didn't know how to process all of this, and that she needed time. Time was all I had given her. Years of time. Years of silence. Now I needed mine. Henrique also wrote a short, evasive message apologizing for any pain I may have caused. He avoided details, avoided truths. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I realized there was nothing left there that interested me. That story was dead, and I had no intention of trying to resurrect it. The following days were spent in seclusion. I didn't answer any calls. I didn't go out. I organized my things. I rummaged through old boxes, tore up letters, donated clothes. It was as if I was cleaning not only my apartment, but also my history. And in the middle of this cleaning, I found an old diary. I leafed through it out of curiosity. It was full of lists of movies, books, plans I never got around to. I saw Bianca's name on almost every page, and I realized that much of what I planned, desired, or dreamed about revolved around her, about pleasing her, about being around her, about being useful. I closed the diary and threw it in the trash. The following week, I quit my job. Not because I was unhappy, but because I realized that my life was built on structures that I didn't consciously choose. Everything around me was the result of adaptations, and now I wanted to start from scratch. I started writing again. It was something I hadn't done in years. Short texts, memories, random phrases. Everything was loaded with pain that was finally beginning to transform into something different. Perspective. I also went back to therapy, with a new attitude. For the first time, I didn't go to talk about others. I went to talk about myself, about the spaces I gave up, the words I swallowed, the guilt I carried for things that were never mine. Each session was a reunion, with the Elisa of before, with the Elisa who almost disappeared trying to fit into other people's molds, with the Elisa who, even though she was hurt, still wanted to build something new. I started going for walks in the morning. I bought a new notebook. I started drinking coffee on the balcony. I did small things, but they were mine alone. And then, one Saturday, I went to a bookstore. I went in aimlessly, but left with a book about women who start over after loss. I read the first chapter sitting on a park bench, and there, between the pages, I saw myself, not as a victim, but as the author. The story of Henrique and Bianca's marriage was over, but my story wasn't, and for the first time in a long time, it was mine alone. I thought the confrontation had already happened that night on stage. I thought raising my voice was enough, but the real breakup, the one that requires more than courage, the one that demands clarity, only came later, in silence, with long pauses and carefully chosen words. No audience, no applause. It was 2 weeks after the wedding. I was in a small coffee shop, reading, when I got Bianca's message. Can we talk? We could. But not the way she expected. Not with me apologizing for exposing her. Not with her trying to patch up the broken image of perfection. I agreed to meet, but with one goal in mind, to close the door between us once and for all. We arranged to meet in a park. I arrived early, as usual. She showed up a few minutes later, wearing sunglasses and looking like someone who doesn't know if they're angry or regretful. She sat down across from me, tense. You destroyed my marriage. She got straight to the point. So did I. No, I just stopped protecting a lie. She took a deep breath. Her eyes were teary, but she didn't look away. You could have come to me. You could have talked to me. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. I shook my head. I tried, for years, but you only heard what you wanted to hear. Silence. Then she whispered, Do you still love him? The question took me by surprise, not because I didn't know the answer, but because for the first time, I realized it didn't matter anymore. No, and even if I did, you have no right to judge me. She took off her glasses. Her eyes were swollen and red. He told me it was a mistake, that you were confused, that it was before we got serious. And you believe that? She hesitated. I want to believe it, she whispered. I looked at her with more compassion than anger. I saw a woman desperately trying to hold up a structure that had already collapsed inside. She needed the fairy tale more than she needed the truth, and maybe now that was her problem, not mine. You didn't lose me at the wedding, Bianca. You lost me when you chose to pretend you didn't know, when you pushed me away with smiles and exclusions, when you made me a supporting character in your story. She lowered her head. We were silent for several minutes. Do you hate me? The question came out low, almost childish. No, but I chose myself. She nodded, as if she understood, and also as if she knew that, deep down, there was nothing left to do. We said goodbye with a cold, formal hug. There was no reconciliation. There was only closure. An end. The following week, Henrique crossed my path. Literally. I was crossing a street in the city center when I heard my name. He came out of a cafe, crossed the street, and stopped in front of me. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt, unshaven, his eyes downcast. He had lost his veneer. Elisa, can I talk to you? Sure. We walked to a nearby square and sat down on a bench. He looked at me as if waiting for permission to exist. I was a coward, he began. Yes, I replied, and I regret it. If regret could fix the past, we would live in a different world. He laughed sadly. Do you still have the letter? No, that was a lie. I burned it at home, in silence, one night when I was alone, but he didn't deserve to know that. I was sincere at the time, he said, but I was also weak. I wanted both things, and in the end, I lost both. I nodded. It was true, but I wasn't there to hear belated confessions. Henrique, I loved you, really, and you felt something too. But between feeling and sustaining, there is an abyss, and you pushed me into it. He agreed. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't try to turn it around. For the first time, he just listened. Do you forgive me? He asked finally. I forgave myself. That's enough. I got up. I said goodbye with a short wave, and I left. We never spoke again. That day, I understood what emotional freedom is. It's not forgetting. It's not punishing. It's being able to face those who hurt us and no longer feel the need to explain, to convince, to ask. That's when the silence returns, but this time, in peace. After it was all over, the ceremony, the confrontations, the final silences, I spent some time not knowing exactly what came next. It's strange, but no one talks about what happens after you finally say everything you needed to say, after you stop trying to fit in, trying to please, trying to exist through the eyes of others. There is an emptiness, but it's not the kind of emptiness that scares you. It's a blank space. And for the first time, that space was mine. I started to fill it slowly. I rearranged the furniture in my apartment. I made room for the light to come in the morning. I got rid of objects that only existed as memories. And, most importantly, I rescued things that were genuinely mine. My forgotten books, my old playlists, my unfinished texts. Writing became more than therapy again. It was reconstruction. I wrote about other women, other losses, other silences. I wrote for myself, but I discovered that, in writing, I was also writing for others. Others who, like me, had fallen silent, who had diminished themselves, who had hidden behind conventions, unbalanced friendships, confusing relationships. I started publishing some texts anonymously. I received messages, women saying, "It sounds like you wrote my story." And that gave me purpose. It reminded me that there is no small pain when it erases us. I started traveling alone again. The first trip was to a coastal town where I didn't know anyone. I took 3 books, a notebook, and no expectations. I sat in cafes, watched people, wrote down random observations that would later become something. I felt the world breathe with me, not against me. On one of these trips, I met a woman named Lara. She worked as a body therapist, but her presence was so welcoming that it seemed like she healed just by being around. We talked for hours about new beginnings, about the act of letting go in order to belong, and about the slow but irreversible process of winning yourself back. She told me something I've never forgotten. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you knew to discover who you are when no one else is telling your story. That hit me hard, because that was exactly what I had done. Today, when I think of Bianca and Enrique, I no longer feel pain. I feel distance, a healthy distance, almost geographical, like something that existed in another country, in another life. The Elisa who loved them, who defended them, who protected them. She also existed, but I had to let her go. And in her place, someone was born who no longer needs to prove anything. Someone who understood that presence is not a favor. That affection that needs to be begged for becomes dependence. And that, as painful as it may be to break old ties, there is a unique beauty in rebuilding yourself with your own hands. If you've come this far, perhaps it's because something in my story echoes within yours. Perhaps you too have been silenced, devalued, hidden behind obligatory smiles. Maybe you are also holding a letter, symbolic or literal, that you never had the courage to open or deliver. My suggestion? Read it, speak up, shout, if you have to. But never again accept being a backdrop in someone else's story. You are the protagonist. You always have been, even when they forgot to tell you. And if you're going to write a new story, let it be yours. With all the scars, but with all the freedom that comes after breaking free. Because there is life after humiliation. There is light after silence. And there is strength, immense strength, in those who survive exclusion and still choose to love themselves every day.